She judged him by his hoodie and sneakers. Seconds later, her entire career was over. Monica tapped her fingernails against the register, barely suppressing her boredom. The late afternoon lull at Kingston Roast Café was the worst part of her shift. Just enough customers to keep her from zoning out completely, but not enough to make time pass any faster. She glanced at the clock. 4:23 p.m. Another hour before her break. She exhaled sharply, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Across the cafe, a group of well-dressed professionals sat near the window, laughing over iced lattes and pastries that cost as much as a full meal. They were the type of customers Monica liked, people who tipped well, ordered fast, and didn't waste her time. Then the door chimed. She looked up out of habit, her practiced customer service smile fading before it could fully form. A man walked in, mid-40s, scruffy beard, hoodie slightly oversized, jeans faded at the knees, sneakers that had clearly seen better days. His shoulders were relaxed, his gaze scanning the menu with the kind of hesitation that immediately irritated her. Monica didn't need to guess. She already knew. Another broke customer, probably here to ask for water, maybe a napkin, or worst of all, one of those people who ordered the cheapest thing on the menu and sat around for hours. She glanced at her co-worker, Devon, who was wiping down the counter. He caught her expression and smirked. "Bet he orders a small black coffee and nothing else," Devon muttered under his breath. Monica smirked back, straightening her posture as the man stepped forward. "Welcome to Kingston Roast. What can I get for you?" she asked, her tone just polite enough to be passable, but laced with clear disinterest. The man gave a small nod, eyes still on the menu. He seemed unsure, hesitant. Just a small black coffee," he finally said, his voice calm but quiet. Monica barely hid her eye roll. Devon coughed to suppress a laugh. "That'll be $2.89, she said flatly, punching in the order. The man reached into his pocket, pulling out a few crumpled bills and some coins. He placed them on the counter, carefully counting them out, as if making sure he had just enough. Monica sighed audibly, tapping her nails again. Why did people like this always come here? There was a gas station across the street where the coffee was half the price. As she handed him the change, her fingers barely brushed against his. His hands were rough, like someone who worked with them a lot. But that wasn't her concern. The man simply took the coffee cup, murmured a quick, "Thanks," and walked toward the seating area near the window. He didn't rush, didn't shrink under the weight of her attitude. He didn't even look at her. She watched him for a second longer than she meant to, something about his quiet confidence throwing her off, but she quickly shook it off. Another customer walked in, and Monica shifted back into work mode, already forgetting about the man in the hoodie. But in less than 5 minutes, she was going to wish she hadn't. Monica barely spared another glance at the man as she went back to her routine. Customers came and went, and the sound of steaming milk and clinking cups filled the cafe. Across the counter, Devon nudged her. "Look at him," he whispered, his smirk returning. Monica followed his gaze. The man had taken a seat by the window, holding his coffee with both hands. He wasn't scrolling through his phone, typing on a laptop, or pretending to read a book like the usual customers who lingered too long. He just sat there, sipping his coffee, watching the street outside. Monica scoffed. She had seen this 100 times before, people with nowhere to be, dragging out a $2 coffee for as long as possible to avoid going back to whatever life they were trying to escape. Still, something about him bugged her. He didn't look ashamed or out of place, like most people who felt self-conscious about sitting in a fancy cafe without ordering much. If anything, he looked comfortable, like he belonged there. Monica shook her head, brushing the thought away. He was just another broke customer, nothing more. A few minutes later, a woman walked up to the counter, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, designer sunglasses perched on top of her head. She carried a leather handbag that probably cost more than Monica's monthly rent. A perfect customer. "Hi there, welcome to Kingston Roast," Monica beamed, her tone suddenly warm and enthusiastic. "Hi." The woman smiled back, scanning the menu. "I'll have an oat milk latte, extra shot, and a croissant, please." "Of course. That'll be $9.75. As the woman pulled out her credit card, Monica noticed the man at the window shift slightly. He wasn't staring at them, but he was definitely listening. She didn't think much of it until he stood up. He picked up his coffee cup, still half full, and walked toward the exit. But before stepping outside, he paused. Monica's stomach tensed for a second, expecting him to ask for something. A free refill, maybe. A cup of water. But instead, he turned his head slightly, just enough to glance at her. "Thank you for the coffee," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something in his tone, something Monica couldn't quite place. Before she could respond, he pushed the door open and walked out. Monica exhaled, shaking off the strange feeling creeping into her chest. Just another broke guy. Nothing important. But then the cafe's front door swung open again, this time with force. The manager stormed in, his face pale and his eyes wide with panic. Monica barely had time to process the way the man left before the cafe's double doors burst open. Her manager, Greg, stormed in, his usual calm and collected demeanor replaced with something she'd never seen before. Panic. His face was pale, his eyes darting around the cafe like he had just walked into a crime scene. Devon straightened up immediately. Everything okay, boss?" Greg didn't answer. He was scanning the cafe like he was looking for someone, until his eyes landed on the empty chair by the window. Monica frowned. Was he looking for that guy? Greg turned sharply toward them. "Where is he?" His voice was sharp, urgent. Monica blinked. "Who?" Greg gritted his teeth. "The man who was just sitting there. Mid-40s. Beard. Hoodie. Where did he go?" Monica exchanged a confused glance with Devon. He just left? Why?" Greg exhaled sharply, running a hand down his face. Damn it. Something about the way he said it, the weight behind it, made Monica's stomach tighten. Why did he care so much? Greg turned back toward the door, as if debating whether to run after him. But then, almost as an afterthought, he turned back to her. "Did you serve him?" His voice was tight. Monica shrugged. "Yeah, small black coffee." Greg's expression darkened. And nothing? Monica gave a confused laugh. "Why are you freaking out?" Greg inhaled sharply, trying to collect himself. Then, in a voice lower than before, he muttered something that made Monica's heart drop. "That was Mr. Reynolds." She stared. "Who?" Greg rubbed his temples, clearly frustrated. "Mr. Reynolds, the regional director of Kingston Roast, the man who oversees all 48 locations in this state. My boss's boss. The reason we even have jobs." Monica felt her throat go dry. No, that wasn't possible. That man, the one she barely acknowledged, the one she practically dismissed, the one she mocked with Devon. That was him. Greg's voice pulled her back. "Tell me exactly how you treated him." Monica hesitated. She opened her mouth to lie, to say she had been perfectly polite. But Greg's face was tight with stress, his jaw locked. He already knew. Devon cleared his throat. We didn't know who he was, boss. He just ordered coffee. Monica served him like any other." He trailed off, realizing how that sounded. Greg's eyes darkened. Like any other what? Devon didn't answer. Neither did Monica. The air in the cafe suddenly felt heavier, colder. Greg exhaled slowly. Then he pulled out his phone. I need to call corporate. Monica's pulse pounded in her ears, and for the first time in her life, she was terrified of losing her job. Monica felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. Her hands clenched at her sides as she watched Greg pace near the counter, his phone pressed to his ear. She couldn't hear what was being said, but the way his jaw tightened, the way his shoulders tensed, she knew it wasn't good. Devon leaned in slightly, whispering, Yo, what if he… Monica shot him a glare. Don't. Greg ended the call. The way he exhaled through his nose told her it was worse than she thought. He turned toward her, his face unreadable. He's on his way back. Her stomach flipped. What? He's coming back. Greg's voice was tense. And he wants to talk to you. Monica's heartbeat pounded in her ears. No, no, no. Greg must have seen the panic in her face because he didn't sugarcoat it. I don't know what you said or did, but if you screwed this up, Monica… He shook his head. You better pray he's in a forgiving mood. Devon swallowed hard, stepping back toward the espresso machine like he didn't want to be anywhere near this mess. Monica's hands felt clammy. She couldn't lose this job. It wasn't her dream or anything, but it paid her rent. She had bills. She had plans. She straightened her back, taking a slow breath. Okay, I'll just apologize. He was nice, right? He won't fire me over one little interaction. Greg's face didn't change. You sure about that? Monica didn't answer, because she wasn't. Then the door swung open again, and there he was, Mr. Reynolds. He stepped inside with the same calm, effortless energy as before. Still in that plain hoodie, those worn-out jeans, those old sneakers. But now Monica knew who he was. Greg straightened instantly. Sir. Reynolds lifted a hand. Don't. Greg clamped his mouth shut. Monica felt frozen in place. Mr. Reynolds walked up to the counter, setting his half-finished coffee cup down with a soft tap. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes… sharp, calculating, locked onto hers. A long silence stretched between them. Then, finally, he spoke. Monica, right? Her throat felt tight. Yes, sir. He tilted his head slightly. Tell me, how do you decide which customers deserve respect? Her stomach dropped. She opened her mouth, scrambling for words. I treat all customers the same. No, you don't. His voice was calm, steady, controlled. She felt her breath catch. I watched you. He placed a hand on the counter, his fingers tapping lightly against the wood. The way you greeted some people like they were VIPs, the way you barely looked at me, the way you and your co-worker laughed because you assumed I was beneath you. Monica's chest tightened. She wanted to deny it, to say he was wrong, to make excuses. But she couldn't, because he was right. Reynolds studied her for another beat. Then with the same calm, measured tone, he said words that shattered everything. You're fired. The words hit like a hammer. She felt everything crumble inside her. Sir, please, No. His voice was firm. I don't need an apology. I need employees who treat every customer with the same respect, no matter how much money they look like they have. Monica's throat burned. I didn't know it was you. Reynolds nodded. And that's exactly the problem. The cafe was dead silent. Even the espresso machine, usually hissing and steaming, seemed to have gone still. Greg looked away. Devon wouldn't even make eye contact. Monica felt her hands tremble. Her job. Gone, just like that. And worst of all, she knew she deserved it. Monica stood there, stunned, frozen, drowning in the reality of what just happened. Fired. Just like that. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Mr. Reynolds hadn't raised his voice, hadn't humiliated her in front of the cafe, but that almost made it worse. The calm way he said it, the way he looked at her like he had already made his decision long before walking back inside, like she was a lesson he was teaching, not a person he was punishing. Her mouth felt dry, her heart hammering inside her chest. "Sir, please." The words came out too fast, too desperate. She hated how she sounded, but she had no choice. "I need this job. I made a mistake. I know that, but I can fix it." Reynolds didn't move. For a moment, she thought, hoped, that maybe he'd change his mind. Maybe he'd reconsider. Maybe this was just a warning. But then he spoke again. "If I wasn't who I am, if I really was just some guy in a hoodie, would you be standing here, begging for my forgiveness?" Her breath caught, her fingers clenched into fists, because she knew the answer. No. If he were just some random man she brushed off, she wouldn't have cared. She wouldn't have thought about it for more than 5 seconds. But now that she knew he had power, authority, control over her paycheck and future, now she wanted to make it right, and he saw right through it. "That's the problem, Monica." Reynolds shook his head. "It's not about me. It's about how you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you." Her throat tightened. He let that sink in for a moment before pushing off the counter and turning toward the door. Greg still hadn't said a word. Devon looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. And Monica? She felt like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. She wanted to argue, to fight, to make him see that she wasn't a bad person. But no excuse would change what happened, because at the end of the day, she had done this to herself. Reynolds opened the door, paused just for a second, then walked out. And Monica, she felt everything crash down all at once. The door swung shut behind Mr. Reynolds, leaving an eerie silence in the cafe. Monica felt like she had just been punched in the gut. Fired. Just like that. Over a $2 coffee and an attitude she didn't think twice about. Her legs felt weak. She reached for the counter, steadying herself, but the weight in her chest wouldn't go away. Greg sighed, rubbing his temples. "You should go." His voice wasn't angry. If anything, it was disappointed. That almost made it worse. Monica swallowed hard, her eyes burning as she grabbed her apron and untied it. No one said anything. Devon kept his head down, pretending to clean, and the customers who overheard the whole thing avoided looking in her direction. With shaky hands, she folded the apron, set it on the counter, and turned toward the door. Each step felt heavier. As she stepped outside, the cold air hit her all at once. The streets were still busy, cars honking, people laughing, life moving on as if her world hadn't just collapsed. She stopped just outside the cafe, staring at the sidewalk. Her mind raced. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was just another day, just another customer. But that was the problem, wasn't it? She had decided his worth before he even opened his mouth. Her stomach twisted as she remembered the way she dismissed him, the way she assumed, without hesitation, that he didn't matter. She had done this to herself, and now she had to live with that. A few feet away, a man in a worn-out jacket counted change in his palm before walking into a fast food place. Monica's chest tightened. How many people had she treated this way without realizing it? She never thought of herself as a bad person. But maybe that was the problem, because being not bad wasn't the same as being good. She took a slow breath, then pulled out her phone, staring at the blank screen. No job, no backup plan, no idea what to do next. But one thing was clear. She would never make this mistake again. How many times have we judged someone just by the way they look, by what they wear, what they order, how much money we think they have. Respect shouldn't be based on status. Everyone deserves to be treated like they matter, because they do. Next time, before you judge someone, ask yourself this: would you treat them differently if you thought they had power? If the answer is yes, then maybe it's time to change.